Today's guest is Iheanyi Igboko. He is a cultural strategist, storyteller, and heritage professional at the forefront of Africa-led cultural innovation. He's the executive director of the Center for Memories, where he works to preserve, document, and reimagine Igbo history and identity for the present and the future. Through festivals, exhibitions, research, and international collaborations, Iheanyi champions culture not just as tradition, but as education, diplomacy, and economic opportunity. His work bridges heritage and modernity, local identity and global relevance, empowering young people to see culture as possibility, dignity, and a viable future. Today on Crisp TV, we explore the business of culture and what it truly takes to build a thriving cultural ecosystem in Nigeria. Mazi Iheanyi, welcome to Crisp TV.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. We have a lot to talk about. I've been following your work around culture, particularly the Igbo culture. And I must commend what you're doing. I'm really a fan. I love what you're doing because I also pride myself as a cultural advocate. Yes. Okay. And I'm curious, why culture? You could have chosen any other career path. Is there something that particularly drew you to the work you're currently doing?
I mean, I don't know the best way to navigate a perfect response, but I like when you said you're a curious person. It was my curiosity that led me into what I'm doing today. So I have a background in microbiology, and I practiced a bit in media and journalism, right? And but again, at some point in my life, I started questioning a lot of things. I wanted to know more. And you know how they say curiosity kills the cat? That curiosity didn't kill me, but it landed me in a place where I would have to do more for myself and for my generation. It was, if you have read The Wretched of the Earth, the author wrote something that still, gripped me till today. Said that every generation out of relative obscurity must discover what its mission is, either fulfill it or betray it. So in finding a perfect response to my journey, I came upon this, and then it's stuck on me that this is a generational purpose, and I have to find a way, to fulfill it. So the journey to cultural advocacy, it wasn't the one I chose; it chose me, and I have to do something and get people along to understand, who we are, our journey, and where we're going to.
How is the journey going so far?
So far, so good. Interesting, frustrating, but I think it's what comes with a journey like the one I've taken upon myself. It's a road less traveled because when I came here, from people's reaction, you don't understand that you do not expect to see a young people. Where you find me, you do not expect a young people to be doing what I'm doing. So I think it's also very important that, young people are the carriers or the vanguard of the future. So if we must have a secured future, it's very important that we begin to be part of, whatever it's happening in our space.
You talked about you being young, and it's kind of strange when people find you doing what you're doing and you're very young, because it's something that is peculiar to elderly people. They are the custodians of the kind of information and knowledge that you have when it comes to culture. And talking about culture, when we were growing up in primary school, in secondary school, we were told that culture is the people's way of life. But now thinking about it, they didn't tell us that culture can also be a source of livelihood, that it can also be a billion-dollar industry, that it's also something that young people can leverage to build wealth. They hit that. It's safe to say that they hit that for most. Why?
So in Igbo cosmology, we always say, "Ada chuego, aina ware gozo," and I bet that's why you weren't taught that. I think it's also very important to mention that one of the things that is at the bane of our growth as a people is our quest, to make money at all costs. It wasn't part of the culture. The culture knows that when you do things, do it very well, become some sort of subject matter expert. Yeah. So whether you like it or not, there are things that are curious to you as a result of what you do. Imagine owning your skill as an obuoja. From 7-year-old, you've been doing it 8 years, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. When you become an expert, AD in the work, people, nations will call on you, to come and show your expertise, and you get paid for it. So, but what you get if you flip it, is that people look at what is the money spinning career industry, and then they begin to build, and most times they become frustrated because most people don't tell you the level of investment you need to make, or to put into something before it begins to yield something in return for you. And because it's not born out of a place of passion, it's born out of place of work, income generation, it becomes frustrating when you look back and see how far you've come, and there's nothing tangible, to represent or that's the equivalent to what you've put in. So, but when you build from a perspective of passion, a build from, I just want to do this, I love doing this, and you surprise yourself along.
I agree with you. Would you say that if they had taught us that culture was a whole lot more while we were growing up, would you say that it would have made a difference? It would have made young people more in tune to trying to know more about their culture and trying to see what they can make out of it.
Yes, it may. I would say may, because the thing is this: when people see money, what happens is that you unleash a lot of quacks, a lot of people who are not supposed to be in there because they are not there for the right reasons. The right reason is also the most important thing. The why. Why do you do what you do? I figure that if you ask a lot of people this question, they'll be stuck. I want to make money. Yeah, it's valid, but is that why? When the purpose of something is not known, abuse is inevitable. And if you look around the society today, you find out that within the culture, you have a lot of quacks. So I'm not going to sit here to tell you that Mr. A, Mr. B, or Miss B or C is the quack person, but within Legi Goezegon, to know who understands what they are doing and who doesn't understand. It's as simple as that.
As somebody that is very knowledgeable when it comes to the Igbo culture, now, how can we gain that level of expertise? How can we get that level of knowledge when it comes to the Igbo culture? I believe there is a lot we are missing out when it comes to the culture.
So my simple advice is to get lost. You can never find yourself when you do not lose yourself. There's something that happens when you lose yourself. When you imagine yourself in a desert or a forest, you're searching for something, right? All your levels of concentration are geared towards a particular direction. And that is what will happen to everybody who genuinely wants to seek out a path for them, who wants to seek out to understand why or what the culture offers or what they want to learn about the culture. Just get lost. Disregard everything you think you know. You have to operate from a place of clean slate. So wipe everything that you have in your slate and start anew, start afresh. And if you begin to absorb like a sponge, gather everything that you can. Don't sieve, just gather, and light will come your path. And then you gain a new knowledge, gain a new perspective, and you begin to see yourself acting, within a certain, direction. So my basic response would be get lost and begin your journey of discovery.
I love it when you said gather. That is the essence of this conversation, to gather, for young people to gather. I'm representing young people right now.
Okay.
And I'm representing them. Now, let's assume that we've become a clean slate. We now want to learn. We now want to gather. That is where you come in. Teach us. How can we understand our culture better? What are those things that we are missing out? I want when people watch this conversation, they should be able to understand Igbo culture to a very high extent from the point of view of their fellow young person, not an elderly person telling them stories, tales by moonlight.
I mean, you put me in a very difficult position by saying teach, because I'm a student, right? Yeah. So in this journey of life, I think it would be very disingenuous to see yourself as someone who knows, more than other people. I think all of us are on that path. We're learning. But if I want to attempt, a perfect response to your question, I would say begin from where you are. Ask, and ask a lot of questions. Go back. This is December period. You go to your village. It's not just by eating apple and ofe and every other thing, but within every festivity, within I ask a very simple question when you come to the Center for Memories where I work. I said, would you be able to name your genealogy? In fact, a lot of people stop at their father and don't even attempt at their grandfather. So you need to go beyond that. Where do I come from? It's a basic question. Basic. What is even the meaning of my name? So you don't even need to wafa or meet anybody. Start within you. Ask, start within you. Ask the basic questions. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why is there a stream where the stream is? Because it would even shock you to understand a lot of the things within your environment. You think it happened by chance, but just ask a question. Why is our market there? Okay? Why? Just find a lot of whys and ask yourself. And by the time you're done with that particular exercise, you see a little bit of maybe change, not shift, but change and shift can happen. Yeah.
Can you answer some of these questions that you want them to go and ask?
Which of the questions?
Okay, let's start with why. Where should I start? So let's start with why we have. You talked about the Igbo etymology. Can you tell us more about that?
So, whenever you look at a culture, there is a set of principles, concepts, worldviews that drive the culture. And for us as Igbo people, ours is encoded in Ordinary. Ordinary encapsulates our worldview. It encapsulates our oppression. It's an operational guide for us. It encapsulates how we relate with one another. So it's like a set of norms that guides us, right? So everything people do should be found within Ordinary, as long as you're interacting with the culture or with the people within the culture. So Ordinary is like our own Bible, for instance. And sometimes when you say Ordinary, people think, oh, you're traditional. No. You don't have to be, and sometimes I hear people say, I am not an ordinary person, and then I quiver. You are born into a culture, and if you're born into the Igbo culture, automatically you are an ordinary person, right? Because there's a set of norms, there's a set of rules guiding the practice, the operations of people born within this culture. And whether you like it or not, you are doing that. Because when somebody dies within your family, there are certain days you cannot bury them as long as you're going to bury them in your community. So if in my community we don't bury on Nkwade, so no matter who the person is and the date you've marked out is an Nkwade, you're not going to bury the person. If you're going to use the market, is Nkwo. So I won't. That market will not open because you're the Igwe or Neke. It's Nkwo. So whether you like it or not, this set of norms guides you. So if they say, if you give birth to a baby boy, on the 7th day, a bear yugu, whether you like it or not, it gave bear yugu on the 7th day, right? So whether you like, it don't need to be a traditional, a firm believer in the traditional system to call yourself an ordinary person. You are born within the Igbo culture. So whether you like it or not, Igbo ordinary. And so that same norms will guide you. And I think it's very imperative for everybody to understand. It's as simple as this. And when you understand it, you begin to find ways to interact with the culture. Start from a place of, the known before you move into the unknown. A lot of people want to start with the unknown to get to the know. No, you start from what you know and then move in if you want. But except you want to be on the periphery, that's within your rights. So, I mean, basically, that's what I would say.
So there is no way, so we cannot remove or separate ourselves from the ordinary, no matter how much we want or no matter how much we feel like it is fetish or it is not in our belief system.
It's just like you want to say you want to separate your soul from your body. You're dead. So it's who you are. You may not like who you are, but you cannot do anything about it. I mean, changing it for instance, you cannot change who you are in that sense because your permission wasn't sought. Yeah, you saw yourself. So it's either you interact with it or you don't interact with it. But you cannot, even if you like, change your name from Amadioha to people of the known. It's still, when your story is being told, they will say, formerly known as Amadioha.
I love the way you put it. Now, let's come back to your work at Center for Memories. You are the executive director at Center for Memories. Am I correct?
Very correct.
How long have you been serving in that position?
I've been privileged to serve since 2021, August 2nd precisely. And so, that's about more than 4 years at the Center for Memories.
That's a long time. That's a long time. What is the core of Center for Memories?
So, I'd like to begin this way, that the Igbo society has faced quite a lot of challenges, beginning from one of the ones that I would consider the biggest challenge that the Igbo society still continues to face is the challenge of identity crisis. So a lot of Igbo people do not know who they are. They can't say a lot about the culture. I don't want to go into the language because there's no way you talk about the culture and not talk about the language. So the Igbo language, if you go back to the 2006 estimation by UNESCO, that Igbo language is also one of the many languages that will go extinct by 2030. They may be right, because if you look at the number of people who speak and the age, of the people who speak the language, you see that if that continues in that state, that sort of language does not have a future. So it's not a prediction, it's an estimation. So do with it whatever you want. Yeah. So for us, we are challenged by that, right? The Center for Memories, we are challenged by that estimation. We don't think that should happen. And we have to do something if we think that we wouldn't want to see our loved culture, beloved language, going into extinct, when we have millions of people which ordinarily should speak that language. So we're doing something about it with the Center for Memories. The identity crisis I mentioned to you, where a lot of people, there are about 5 cultural linguistic divisions within the Igbo society, where we have the Northern Igbo, right? We have the Southern Igbo, we have the Eastern Igbo, you have the Northeastern Igbo people, right? For instance, people around Ikwo Ezi in Abakaleke at the Northeastern. So you come to the Western, you have the Western Igbo society. This set of people, you may likely say they don't see themselves as Igbo, where you have the Eka, Okwane, Anioma. So I think it's only Anioma that they sees themselves as Igbo. But when you look at the Eka, Okwane sometimes see themselves, some people see themselves as Igbo. And then you come to the Southern Igbo, where you have the Uwere, the Olo, the Umuaya, and then you have the Eastern, we call that the Cross Riverian Igbo, where you have Afi Igbo, Hofia, Abiriba, Arochukwu, because they are bounded by either Cross River or Akwa. So it has affected the culture, or there's a marriage of these cultures in these locations that I've just mentioned to you. So you can't talk about the Igbo society without looking at the division of the cultural linguistic group that they belong to. It will help you to understand these people very well. And that is what we do at the Center for Memories, where we paint this identity for people, where we help to document, preserve the history, the culture, the identity, the excellence, of the Igbo people, So our work at the center is standing on a tripod, Makonya, Ta, Nechi. So it's very important that when you're discussing about the Igbo people, Igbo culture, you look at a certain era So the era helps you to understand what happened, what life was, now what is happening, what kind of future do we need to have. And then there's a certain categorization again. If you want your work, to be deeper, we look at 3 categorizations of Ndigbo. The Ndigbo at home, what we call home is maybe the 13 home states or the 5 Igbo southeast states, the some parts of Cross River, some parts of Delta, some parts of Edo, like a bunch of people in Edo have Igbo origin. Some parts in Benue, so there are a lot of Igbo people within. Then you look at Ndi Igbo in Nigeria. So outside of the Igbo land, there are Igbo people scattered. In fact, I can tell you a lot of Igbo people in Lagos who, apart from their names, and most likely if they remember the state they come from, they may not know or have any other attachment of being Igbo, right? And then you have the last set of people, Ndi Igbo in diaspora. One of the markers of a place that is habitable is whether you can find an Igbo person there, you can find a Catholic church there, or you can find a bottle of Coca-Cola there. So when you don't find any of these markers, you just have to run away from that particular place. It's a joke, actually.
A very funny one, because an Igbo person, a Catholic, and a bottle of Coke.
Yeah,
these are like very powerful things that are powerful. It's very symbolic. Like the fact that we're able to put this thing together is a joke, but it makes a lot of sense.
It's not my joke, so it's somebody else's joke.
I'm saying it makes a lot of sense if we can actually like think deeper. It makes a whole lot of sense. You mentioned that there's a prediction that Igbo language to go into extinction by 2030. That's 5 years from now.
It was made in 2006 by UNESCO. It's not an estimation. So it came off a study of, number of people who are alive and who are speaking a certain languages, So when you look at the politics of language, you look at a country like France. If left for the people in France alone, French language may have died a number of years ago. So, but you can understand why they have a strong grip on Francophone countries. So it's a politics, the same as Britain. So many people don't understand the politics of IELTS. They know you speak English. They know you, but these people have a certain way of institutionalizing whatever it is they want to see, stay alive. So if, anybody that comes from Nigeria speaks English, we just allow. No, they have to have an institutional way of measuring and putting on the pressure on you so that you can continue to study the language. And that is the only way the Anglo-Saxon language can stay alive. So the politics of it is sometimes what we miss out on, right? So what are those political institutions that we as Ndigbo have to sustain our culture and keep our language alive? Think about the Center for Memories, Yeah, so look around you in institutions, you find the Confucius Center. So the Chinese people are also coming in. So a lot of our people, they're offering free education to people to study Chinese language. And I know a couple of persons, I know 3. And then you look at other soft power elements like the Korean movies. In fact, our women are gone with the Indian and Korean movies. And a lot of people who have not stepped foot inside Korea can say all of those words, and we are there.
Interestingly, I'm not in the Korean aspect. I'm in the Chinese aspect. Yes, what you said just it just made me to ponder for a few seconds. The politics of language. That is very powerful because I don't think I've ever heard somebody use that term, politics of language. I don't think we know that there is something like politics of language. We see a lot of attention being moved towards, you need to learn French for you to go to Canada. If you don't learn French, it will be difficult for you. If you learn French, you have an easier access to access Canada. You talked about Chinese. Very correct. I've been learning Chinese language for a very long time because I love their culture. I'm not even going to lie. Like I told you, I also see myself as a cultural advocate. I love Chinese culture. And the way they push their culture, their children. A few days ago, I saw a 3-year-old boy learning martial arts. Very excellent. You see that these things, they are very intentional about it. The language, I know a lot of people that have left Nigeria for China just because of the language. But my question is it possible? I know that Center for Memories is doing their best to preserve and document the Igbo culture. But how is it possible for us to achieve this level of influence? Is it possible for us to play our own politics of language when it comes to Igbo language? Especially because in Nigeria, we have a lot of diverse languages. Which one are they even going to focus on? How can we achieve this thing that France has been able to achieve, China has been able to achieve, and Korea and other countries has been able to achieve with their language?
You can't do anything successfully unless you're conscious of it. You have to be conscious of what it is you want before, telling yourself whether you want to do this or not to do it. So these countries I've mentioned are well aware of where they are. There are a lot of countries I can tell you that have only about 5 speakers of a particular language. And then they are doing something intentional to ensure that a new generation of speakers, learn the language and, look at and sustain it. The Igbo language wasn't the only language that was mentioned that would likely go into extinction. There were a host of other languages. There's even language that has only one speaker who as at that point, who was 60-something years old. So it's likely, when you look at such a culture, only one speaker alive, only one speaker of that culture and of that language alive, and it's about 65 years. So it means that if nothing is being done to get 3-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds to learn the language will die a natural death. So for us, we have to be intentional as a people. It's funny because when we look at a lot of the soft culture, like I mentioned to you, it happens in music, in movies, in gaming, right? So I see a lot of people like Thor, and they don't know that that cosmology could be from another place. But Thor is the story of our own Amadioha or Shango. But if you watch Shango, you would have run away from it. A lot of people, watch Avengers, they do this, they do that, So there are a lot of cultural stories, that people consume, and they don't feel anything bad about it. But once it's the Igbo cultural story, their antennas are woken, right? But they've been consuming the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology, the British mythology, and then nothing. So, but once the Igbo mythology comes into play, everybody's senses are awakened, right? I think it has to come from a sense of consciousness. Most times, there are 2 things that happen to a culture upon attack, right? So, cultures are actually attacked, right? So, if I don't attack this culture, I will not be able to amplify the essence of the culture I want you to abide by. So, the most convenient thing to do is to attack this culture to show you. A lot of people feel so very inferior. So most times when I speak English, I want my English to be boutique. Yeah, I don't need you to sense where I'm from when I'm speaking English. If it's possible for me on this pod, I'll be speaking Igbo. But I know that the pod is not meant for only Igbo persons. But my English should sound as Igbotic. It shouldn't sound Hausatic. It shouldn't sound Yorubatic because I'm not from those culture. It's not like there's nothing bad about a culture, but I don't need you to second guess when it comes to my identity. My identity is one of the most important things that I have. So if every Igbo person wears this as a cloth, it becomes very easy. We don't invest in research and development around the culture, right? And that's the difference. That's why you could see telenovelas in Spanish. That's why you could see movies from South Korea traveling down here. A lot of people they're opening up their place, their culture to you. They want you to be a part of it. And that's the only time they can monetize it. And even the monetization has started because people now subscribe. People pay. You're paying back to the culture. When you go to United Nations, you see the politics of it as well. Vladimir Putin can speak very crisp English, but he always speaks Russian. He always. I tried that. I went for a conference somewhere in Portugal, and I said I don't know how to speak English. I want to speak Igbo.
What happened?
They got an Igbo interpreter. And the person was paid. I said, yeah, this is what conscious people do. Imagine the Enugu State House of Assembly, Abia, Imo, Ebonyi, all having their dialogues in Igbo language. What do you think will happen? Reporters from across media outlets will employ people who understand the language. So you're talking about generating employment opportunities. That's employment for them. Imagine the Enugu state government, even if it's not every day, one day, right? Fully. Imagine what happens when they decide to, oh, because we're representative of the people, let's adorn the local fabric. What do you think? Enugu has a fabric that can match their Akwete. It's known as Abo. It's in Isuzo. It's largely untapped.
Why? Why is it untapped?
That's the problem. So how do you, when you don't understand the thing, when you don't value your thing, that's na onye kpọọ ụba ya mkpọkọrọ agbataobi were ya mere ebe a na-ekpofu afịfịa. So we have called our culture mkpọkọrọ for a long time. So if you move to the United Nations, you see, what people do around. I mean, before a lot of languages were adopted, I mean, there were about the English, the French, and I think Spanish or something. But now you have about 7 languages spoken in the United Nations. And I mean, take for instance, Vladimir Putin, who speaks crisp English. And if he moves into the United Nations, he's speaking to his people, he's representing his people. He will speak in a language that these people can relate to. Right? So, but when we come here, everybody wants to show that they have the best of education. And then the only marker of, best education is the Queen's English, right? But I don't want to learn Queen's English. And that's why you have a lot of schools here in Igbo that is built on British curriculum, American curriculum, but they don't know anything. I have a very funny story. I have a friend, Juan Yocha, and so when she was coming to Nigeria, so she was looking for schools where her children, can stay in to improve their Igbo language fluency. And she was shocked that when the school she enrolled her children in, that the children are the best speakers of Igbo language in that school. These are children who were born in another culture, in another country, coming home to meet children who were mostly born here in Nigeria, in Igbo, and do not have a fluency of their language. That's so bad. That's bad. That's very bad. And you go into our rural communities, you find out that na eji English akuzi Igbo. Right? So it's funny, but it's very sad, because when you look at all of those things, you go back to that estimation of 2006, you realize that if we continue this way, a lot of things would go wrong. And that is why for me, I decided to test this. I traveled to Portugal for a conference, and I said, for my session, I don't trust my English. So I want to speak in a language I am comfortable with, and that's the Igbo language. And the organizers had to go look for an interpreter. And I tested, I said, oh, this thing can work. So imagine if we come back to our houses of assembly, where we have people who are representing different parts of our Igbo, meet every week to discuss the interests of Igbo. Imagine if they speak Igbo in our houses of assembly. Imagine the switch that will happen when the media outlets begin to look for Igbo people, Igbo speakers to work for them and be able to interpret, the deliberations from their house. Imagine if the state governments, decide to adorn or decide to begin to look at the culture, the language, the entire essence of who we are as a people. Because culture is local. Everything you want to look out for within the culture is there. So there's nothing you will find today that you will not see. Whether it is governance, whether it is politics, whether it is anything, there has been a marker that has been laid down by the people who walked this path before us. I think it's very important to always look at this, because culture is foundational to development. There's nothing it is you want to do today that you won't find within the culture. If you're traveling, if you are projecting, okay, let me tell you something. Sorry. Yeah. So every culture wants to contribute to the global body of knowledge. You ask yourself, what is it that we are contributing? You cannot contribute. You can't tell a British how to wear a suit, right? You can't tell an Arab man how to wear the jalabia, or what they call it. So you only teach them how to do the things that come from your culture. So if there's nothing for us to contribute, why are we even going there in the first place?
That's deep. It's very interesting that you traveled to Portugal and for your speech, you decided to use Igbo language. I can't wait to do something like that. And I think that, just like you said, if we can start adopting things like this, it will start. We will start having people will start respecting our language more, especially when it comes to the global landscape. Imagine you dressed in your full regalia and then you're speaking your language confidently. Because I watch some speeches, they do it in Chinese, they do it in French, just like you said, Putin. But when it comes to our own, we want to speak the best English. That is also why I love personalities like Chimamanda Adichie. She does her thing her own way. When she speaks her English, you can know that this person is Nigerian. And she finds a way to infuse Igbo in whatever she's doing when she's making her presentation and speeches. And it's something that young people should actually emulate. Even if you want to speak your English, find a way to make sure that you leave a mark. I am Igbo. This is my culture. So that when you leave that place, they don't just remember you for what you presented, but also for who you are and where you are coming from.
I think a lot of us are not proud of the culture. I think I need to be direct straight here. So in the past three years, one of the major work I've done is to go through schools, because I realized that most of the Ivy League schools in Enugu here, the parents have given a direct instruction to the school authorities not to teach their children Igbo.
Can imagine.
Yeah. So it's coming from a place of inferiority complex. Right, so they will ask you Jibwe, right? And I always tell you, people think in terms of Naira and Kobo. Everything is on Naira and Kobo. There are some nuances, deeper nuances that you can imbibe just from the knowledge of your culture and your language. There are things, because people always interpret things. When you hear of a concept, you try to interpret it locally in a way that it makes sense to you. For that children, it is lost, because you haven't given them a background to operate with. So when they come across something, it is just there. They won't understand it. They've lost. They are losing. Right? I sometimes come into rooms and then I talk, and then people look at me and, oh, you're filled with wisdom, and then I laugh. The so-called wisdom is the knowledge of my language and my culture. For instance, I was talking about the Sustainable Development Goals in Portugal, and I told them that the rest of the world came late to the conversation. That the concept of the Sustainable Development Goals is something that the Igbo society had long known and operated with, because we have a concept known as Onye and Awaneya, which easily translates to the goal of the SDGs, to leave no one behind. Right? And if you look at it, we sourced locally. We reduced the carbon footprint. Nobody was importing anything from China or from anywhere. We had it within and we were using it. We relied on one another. We operated and provided solutions to our society through the age grades, right? So when I want to marry and I need a house, my age grade will gather together, and then they'll help me and build a house. They'll get the mud from the community, they'll get the thatch from the raffia tree, and they build a house for me, right? So if you look at the SDGs from the Goal 1 to Goal 17, you find out that I just mentioned about partnership. In our communities, you go from one community to the other, and they'll tell you, Abagana, it was preservation of life on earth and water. Because I went in Tanta. Any little thing we see, want to, the average Nigerian, any animal they catch there in a meat. Yeah. So if it wasn't done within the ordinary, people will not respect it. And we built an egalitarian society, built on the principle of fairness, equity, and justice. And that's why you have Ofonogu. So once you hear those words, they just sound like the words from the Bible from you, because the ordinary is our own Bible. So if you imbibe by the tenets of ordinary, that's why in that era, people lived in harmony. People respected, there was a huge respect for everything in nature, humans, animals, water. Not today, when the so-called DBs and SNYs will go and pollute the water, put plastics inside the water that they are feeding Chianaka.
Pour Sprite and Coke.
I mean, so I don't understand where all of those things are coming from. It shows the people who lack deep understanding. That to a cultural person, it does not mean when I put Nzu, it is not what you need to have a good understanding, grasp of your culture, who you are, why. Because when the purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable.
Deep. You've spoken about why a lot. How can we find our why? How can we find our purpose? Like you said, if the purpose is not found, then it's more like we don't know what we are doing. We don't know where we are going. How can we find our purpose?
I think I said that before, like
asking questions.
Get lost.
Get lost.
Yeah. So when you get lost, so let me tell you how I got lost. I think I shared a bit of it. But what got me where I am today, started questioning my name, my surname. What does it mean? Yeah. Yeah. I started questioning everything I see within our community. And then I started attending events that I feel like I can learn a thing or two. And then I met Chik Odwa, who works with CNN at the point. And then she told me she left Nigeria when she was 2. Her family, left Nigeria when she was 2. So she was disconnected from the culture. But she, when it happened for her, she started reading. She was reading and consuming a lot of, content. And that's what got her to where she was. And then I asked myself, me, where they born for this country, I don't even know to the level. And she challenged me, said, every 3 months, read about 3, 4, 5 books, and then let's discuss about it. It's not even about the discussion part. Read. I said, where would I find? Said, start from your community. And then I started. I started reading and consulting people, meeting. I was going to places where people don't even want to go. It was because I was lost. So when you are lost, nothing ever makes sense to you anymore, rather than finding your purpose, the answers. If you watch the Godo, when the community sent them on a mission, there was nothing, even the distractions that were coming from the spirit world. If you are distracted, you not find your way back. So only those who pay attention will return, and they will return with something.
You spoke about identity crisis, which is one of our major problems. But I think that there is something I've observed recently amongst young people. I think there is a cultural awakening. Maybe it's not become so big, but from the lens of a young person, from my own lens, I believe a lot of people have seen it as well. We now see parents, especially those in diaspora, now teaching their children Igbo language. Some are now becoming more intentional. We see it on social media, and we tend to celebrate it because before it wasn't like that. Some years ago, when you see children that are just speaking their normal English abroad, they don't really care. Their parents don't really care about teaching them. Even while I was growing up, I know some of my cousins, they didn't know how to speak Igbo. They were living in Nigeria. They were here. They don't know how to speak Igbo. But now, they are actually interested in learning how to speak it. There are a lot of people like that. And I see this as a good sign. It's a good sign. And not just that. We now have apps that are now helping children, young people to now learn it in a fun way. We have YouTube channels. It's more like we are now leveraging on technology to preserve our language and our culture. And even we now have top personalities, content creators. They're now priding themselves around some Igbo names and titles. We have names like Ijele of Africa, Ago of Enugu, Ada Ofotu. You see, names like this is as if now Achalugo, Odogu, everybody wants to be called Achalugo. When you call somebody Achalugo, the person feels very special. When you call somebody Odogu, the person feels very special. And I believe that there is, I choose to call it a cultural awakening because it's a good thing. So now my question is, why is this happening? It wasn't obtainable some years ago, but now it's as if young people are now gradually going back. They are gradually reconnecting with their roots. Maybe not so well. And I even forgot to mention, we now have people identify that they are DBs online openly. DB on social media. They now pride themselves. Young people. This is not something you would see a few years ago. When we are growing up, it's mostly elderly people doing their Dibia things. But now we have young people priding themselves as Dibia. Why are we experiencing this thing right now?
I mean, the world moves in cycles and seasons, so there are times and seasons for everything. Even in the Bible, Ecclesiastes, there's a times and seasons for everything under the face of the earth. And in Igbo culture recognizes there are almost about 4 cycles within Onwoga, Onwaze, and the Regawa. So a lot of notable DBS like Professor Ane Anechukwume will tell you that we're in the period of enlightenment. So this cycle span almost 1,000 years, right? Each of these cycles spans almost 1,000 years, and this enlightenment could be what you describe as the reawakening. I wouldn't deny that. I see that, and I see that appear in forms. Look at what is happening within the musical industry within the eastern Nigeria. You find that before now, a lot of the artists will move to Lagos and stay there, and then they're forced to speak Yoruba or use English. But a lot of them, the Jerichs of this world, the Kola Boys, the Aguero Banks, the Hasta La Vistas, they don't care whether you understand their Igbo or not. The Tough King even brings his own dialect into the entire miss, and then Church Abasa. So it's part of the awakening. You see a lot of fashion designers. Look at what Ubuntu is doing. A lot of, they express their Igbo-ness, because Isiago Aboloife Jimalai, unfortunately, it was brought in by the Dutch people, and then everybody wants to show I'm Igbo, and then they'll carry one Isiago. You don't even know how Isiago even came. What do you find? What animal totems represent the Igbo people? So again, I go back to why a lot of people do not understand, and then they chook their mouth and they think that they know a lot. It's okay. It's okay to know. It's okay to seem like you want to know. But it's very important that while we celebrate the reawakening that happens, it's also very important to make sure that we direct people properly so that they do not abuse. The Igbo culture is not just symbolic. It is sacred. It is spiritual. Spiritual because when it comes to skills, like if people are creatives, it's one of the most revered, skill set within the Igbo society. In fact, it's from lineages. If I want to war ozo, family ozo, I can't just take it to anybody. So it's what your identity does for you when you know who you are from. Like by the time you study your great grandparents and go on, you may begin to see something that links to what you're doing, and you see a lot of shift will happen for you. You're not just doing this because you are Iheanyi. You are doing this because you come from a succession of great men and women who have done this. You are walking on the shoulders. You're walking on the shoulders of giants who have stood, right? So I'm not doing this because I'm doing this because this is my identity. This is a core essence of me, who I am, my people. This is what we are renowned for. So that's what identity does for you. In the past, your great grandparent, because it was our means of communication. It was, they are respected because every flow of communication has to go, through them. They sound the gong, and everybody, when you hear this spectacular. Sorry, I switched to Igbo already. So, so it's quite an addition for me because I think if we really understand this identity thing, but again, I do not blame the people entirely. Our identity was truncated by a lot of activities. One was the colonial invasion. We used to live in our communities. We used to live as Ndi Nsukka, as Ndi Owerri, not as Ndi Igbo. Right? And then when colonialism happened, they brought everybody. Brought everybody together, mixed them, whether you like it or not, and gave us the kind of identity that we have. We're still battling with that. And then we had the Nigerian Biafran War of 1967 to 1970 that that worsened a lot of things. Take, for instance, the story shared by Stella Damasus. Their family name is Dojuku. So you can imagine a people who have a cultural affinity with people who led a rebellion, sort of, and then the leader of that rebellion has an Ojuku as a surname, and you come out in Nigeria to mention that you're an Ojuku, right? So you're going to have a lot of backlash, and I understand why a lot of people would keep changing their names from an Igbo seeming name to perhaps a more English name. You see somebody appear, my name is Sandra Richards, and then you are hoping to see a white person you've been communicating with, then appears an Achalugo. And then it becomes confusing. So I understand that this is self-preserving, but we have moved past that era. So it is left for you to frame your own narrative, because if you don't invest in telling your story, another person will tell it for you and may not even tell it correctly. So it's your responsibility to tell the story. To people call me fine. My name is not fine. And so most of the people call me fine, I don't even respond because they're not calling me. If you want to call me Iheanyi. And when you call Iheanyi, I know you are talking to me. So I don't care, because anywhere I travel to, I tell them the same thing. If I can spend time to learn how to pronounce your name, whether your name is Stoichkov, I will learn it. And then when it comes to my own name, you are telling me, oh, it's too long. It's too long. Go there. Call me by my name. Yeah, if you want to show you respect me, the best way to show that you have respect for me is the way you call my name. It's not by appending auntie, brother. Call my name very well, the way I love it. If I tell you my name is Iheanyi Igboko, call me Iheanyi Igboko, and that's my name. That's respect, and people would have to learn to do that. And again, for those of us who are Catholics, you are not forced during baptism to give your first child's name will be English. I don't do that. You won't do that. You don't try that with me. I try to maintain, whether you like it or not. I don't have, and I see a lot of families adopting that today. They give their children 2 Igbo names, right? So then there's nothing, because you don't see an English person and ask the person, what's your Igbo name? You see a French person, what's their Igbo name? They don't. So why do we? And even what we do today after traditional marriage, some person will still go and do church marriage. Do those people you copy their own marriage? Do they do their own tradition? It's their own traditional marriage that you're doing. So it's confusion. You come to an event and then they do opening prayer and then they do breaking of color. It's a people who are steeped in identity crisis. So they don't understand the why. So you see them doing it repeatedly. You've done this thing and you're repeating it again. Is it not marriage? It's not opening prayer. You're breaking color in the culture. And so when you look at all of the things, we don't interrogate enough. We don't question them enough, because if we do ask the lot of right questions, we would have shifted a lot of things. And that's why for us at the center, we don't have an event and we do opening prayer, because we know we're going to break the collar. When you're breaking the collar, that's where the real communion happens. You're saying, it is in our own that the real Enugu, because you break, everybody participates in the breaking of collar. And that after the breaking of collar, you work for Anyoji, you hear the ancestors. But we don't see where the angels participate in the Holy Communion or the saints during the Christian service. But for us, it's like I told you, it's a symbolic culture. Nothing would ever leave you wanting for more, because as they play the show, that's what the culture subscribe to in a very good way, not in the way of people who want to swindle you or do a lot of awansi magic for you. It's not a magical, it's a spiritual, it's a symbolic, and it's very present, for all of us.
So from what you're saying, people shouldn't say the opening prayer and still break the code. I have to choose one.
I'm just saying, you should know why you're doing what you're doing. Sometimes people ask them, why do you say the opening prayer and then do the breaking of collar? They don't know why. So for me, it's immaterial, right? It's when you come as Igbo people, we're in the Igbo. We break the collar. What do you say during breaking of collar? What do you say when you're doing the opening prayer?
I think I know why.
Okay, tell me.
Because people are Christian. We have Christians, and then these Christians are also Igbo people. So they are trying to observe their Christian faith without leaving their culture behind. It's more like a fusion.
Let me make it easy for you. All Christians within the Igbo culture are Igbo people. But not all Igbo people within that same place are Christians. So one thing that is not to be denied is that all of us within that place are Igbo people. So what is that thing that brings all of us together? There you have it.
So, from what you said, is more like there's a clash of cultures.
It's always, from Things Fall Apart, you read it, there's a clash, tradition versus modernity, right? You would always see it. You know, today, that's why some people will come out and say that the Igbo society is a patriarchal society. It's because, other than about for women, and people stopped to question a lot of things that happen, because the Igbo society has a fundamental principle, ifekulo, ifakudebia, and that is possible because we always want a balance. We know that when something leans extremely to one side, it distorts the balance at every point in time. So you would always find that balance within the culture. It's not missing. So it's because we've stopped to interrogate the culture. It's because we do not even pay attention to what is happening within the culture. And that is how Miri gets Bano Pubogoro.
I think what we are trying to also achieve is that balance you just spoke about by the practice of saying the opening prayer and still breaking the collar. Is that not balance?
Like I said, I gave you an analogy. I said, except there are people, even when there are people outside of the culture, okay, there's no Igbo event that starts without the breaking of collar.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Igbo event. And that breaking of collar is prayer making.
Of course.
Is declarations. So what else do you do in the opening prayer? So you just have to find a way to insert Jesus into the culture, because Jesus is not a part of our culture. Our culture do not know Jesus. So maybe when we go back into our churches, we can now bring Jesus in, because the culture does not recognize Jesus. I don't know if you understand. So sometimes when people break the collar and then they should better go back to church, because that's where you do that. Not because, so you can't afford to do that in other people's culture, because this is something that has an emotional appeal to a people. And sometimes you see people trying to dilute the culture by saying, oh, let's integrate it into the church. You don't have to integrate. The church doesn't have to do a lot. The church doesn't need to change in the church. Do what the church is all about and leave it. Leave what is for the culture. So you want to tell the people that outside the kwanjo, you are diluting the culture. Allow the culture to be. Focus on your evangelization and your gospel, and retain the core essence of your key mission, and leave the other things aside. Because let me tell you what they do. Why they do that is to get a lot of people out of the culture into the church. Right? Yeah. So
all right. So listening to you so far, I mean, it's not like I doubt what people are saying, but now I can strongly agree that you indeed have a lot of wisdom. You still don't want to agree with people, right?
I won't. I'm
learning.
Yeah, because my father warned me never to accept some tags, veteran, expert. Yeah, so run away from those words, because once you imbibe it, it has a way of stunting your growth, because you think you've arrived. And that's one of the things that happen to people when they feel like they've arrived. They stop learning. Yeah. So I'm a lifelong learner. Right. So, yeah.
I love that your father said that to you. It's actually a good thing to tell your child, because I think that's quite common with, especially the young people you have nowadays. If you just give them certain compliments, start getting to their head and they're like, there's nothing else you want to tell me. I know it. Please hold it there. So all those kind of things is very important. Yes, clock it. But all the same, you actually have a lot to give to the society when it comes to culture, right? And now, talking about preservation and documentation, Center for Memories cannot do it alone. Now, how can other people come in? How can parents come in? How can other organizations come in? How can other institutions, government, how can they come in to make sure that we achieve this idea of preserving and documenting our culture?
So, if Center for Memories wants to do it alone, then we will die and will not achieve anything. So it will be so out of place for us to think that we can do it alone. What we do, what we try to do, what we try to answer as our generational question from an institutional perspective is to create the inspiration that would enable a lot of people to come into the scene. When you look at it, the Igbo people like money. So let me talk about money. When you look at it globally, according to UNESCO, the creative and cultural industry generates about $2.25 trillion annually and employ over 30 million people. So run the numbers, run the money as an Igbo person. So you understand that, in Nigeria, the entertainment sector alone, entertainment, I didn't say the creative and culture, entertainment, that's Nollywood and music, contribute about $7 billion to the GDP. So imagine what we can do, how we can convert the storytelling that generates money for Nollywood and music in the entertainment sector using our own artifacts, our folklore, our culture, our music. This year alone, we worked with over 11 people coming from Ivy League universities in America and UK. We are currently working with two students, PhD, for their PhD. They're in Harvard. One is working on government models. The other one is working at particular artifacts of interest from the Igbo area. You come to Cambridge, we're working on the war story, we're working on Akwete, we're working on different aspects. And these guys will present this thesis, possibly they'll monetize it, and that's fine because they've also invested. I tell you what Volkswagen is doing. Volkswagen has invested a lot of money for many years on Odeshi, and our people are not interested. Our people do not want to, but other people, they know your culture more than you. They understand. Today, algorithm is the thing, but we had a system of binaries, S and O's. Yeah, and today, people are moving the culture, advancing it. And I remember I tell you, the center stands on a tripod, Makwanyata and Echi. I get them before, no be property. People are moving on from I get them before. There was a conference to understand the phenomena of witchcraft and wizardry wanted to happen in Enugu. And it became a prayer season. People say, oh, they want to look. When you say a concept, when you say a phenomena is, it's most prevalent in a particular place, you need to study it. And that's what our culture has lost. Our culture has lost research, documentation. And if you allow other people to do that for you, I traveled to the United States last year. What was the bulk of my work? To help develop a thesaurus for Igbo origin artifacts, and even help them to tell them what the Igbo artifacts represent and what they do. But these are works they've collected for hundreds of years, and they understand some, they don't understand. What they use the knowledge of that to do would
bust our brains.
So today people talk about thermodynamics, aerodynamics. So you just believe that a plane can just grow wings and then fly. You don't understand that what we're doing is science as well. Early this year, sometime in the middle of this year, Dubai found a way to make rain fall. And then you see the Dibia Uruburu, who has the knowledge of holding the rain and making rain fall. And you say, oh yeah, wajog. But people, because, it's laughable because we have to laugh at our ignorance, So if we don't document and progress this, other people will do that. The world is open now. A lot of people know the influx of people down here to learn a lot of things, to understand your system, to look at what anthropologists have to say about your culture and where you're coming from. You don't need it, they need it. They understand it. You don't understand it because you know it, you see it is common, right? So for them, they're looking for new forms of knowledge. So when you don't see yours, they will still utilize it and come here and bring it back to us, and we pay massively for something that we have within our culture. So it's all left for us to look and see how we can progress the culture. So other people are coming into it. Today, you see, like you mentioned, you have musicians who now sing in Igbo language without apology to anybody. You see content creators who are doing their thing in Igbo language. You see, there's this, I don't know the name of that company again, but they produce Igbo songs for children. So, and it's very funny. Well, a lot of it.
I've seen it on YouTube.
Across the West, a lot of Igbo families now play that to their children. And they will grow, they will become better. You see a lot. I've seen a cartoon company that we are talking with to begin to generate cartoons using Igbo culture, Igbo principles, and I think the culture is growing. Like you mentioned, the awakening is there, but the center stands as a hub to direct people. We are not doing everything. So if people come to us and say we want to do, I said there are other people who are doing this. We can point you towards their direction. What we do is to document what is going on within the culture. Culture evolves. What the culture was yesterday may likely not be what it will be today, and may likely change in the nearest future. So for us, is to document those changes and when it changed. We were telling a particular story about somebody, and someone came out and said, "Oh, why didn't you tell people that he doesn't want to be known as this?" I said, before he made that, he had something. So you also, in telling your story, you have to make it balanced so that people will understand when that shift happened and what and why, because the why is something that lacks within our culture. So we always want to provide the why so that people will come to knowledge of that and decide for themselves what they want to do and what they don't want to do.
Talking about the global cultural ecosystem, the Africa-Europe Partnership for Culture Nigeria cluster was recently launched in Nigeria. I got to know about that because you participated in it, right? Now, what does this mean for the cultural ecosystem in Nigeria?
So what it means for the culture in Nigeria, ecosystem in Nigeria, is massive. In fact, there are a lot of opportunities happening for artists, for cultural custodians. The world wants new forms of knowledge, like I mentioned. So they've probably seen enough from the West. They also want to see what's happening elsewhere. So that fund would mean that a lot of money will come to artists to have some sort of exchanges. So an artist working on a particular medium would identify an artist working in Europe, and both of them would, work on something, perhaps learn from each other's principles and their why. So there's a knowledge, exchange in hands. And then for us who are doing festivals, we can travel, to any part of Europe, be part of their festivals, and contribute, in shaping the festival, and also supplying artists, storytellers, musicians, and anybody that the particular festival needs. And then when we have our own festivals there, we can also, they want that level of immersion to happen. But most importantly, there's capacity development, like I mentioned. Capacity development is something our people has not really found a way to pay attention to, because there's a certain label, on the culture. So people do not want to really go in. In fact, sometimes people want to say something and say, so why do you need to validate whether you go to church or not when you're talking about a culture that you rightly belong to? It's as if you're seeking permission from somebody to be able to identify, with that culture. And it has led to the decline of so many art forms. For instance, Uli. Uli is a women's skill, and is actually done by women. So, and we noticed that we can't even find young people who can do Uli. So Professor Chris Ikweme, who has been working on in that area for many times, will tell you that sometimes we need women who can do some Uli for us. And they said that no, the women have become Christians, that they excommunicated them when they were doing this. They don't give them communion. They tell them that they are doing fetish. And you ask yourself, what is fetish about doing Uli?
What does Uli mean exactly?
So Uli is a skill that is equivalent to the tattoos of today that you have, but it comes from the Uli pod, comes from Uli tree, right? You get it, and then it's almost like an ink. They use it, to do different kinds of art on the walls or on the bodies. For instance, in the pre-colonial society, when you see a married woman, for instance, you don't need to ask the woman whether she's married. When you see the Uli done on her body, you know that this woman, it was a form of communication. So in decor, they relied on some CBD or some other creatives that they've done to use it to decorate the house. So we are an art society. So you see one form of art or the other, by different people, and excommunicating those women meant that the skill may have to die a natural death. And today we're seeing a lot of young people who are trying to, but without the proper knowledge and understanding of how that is done, they may really not get it right. And that particular art skill is diluted and it dies. So it's really a sad thing. And I think when people own the culture, we would minimize to a very great extent the chances of stuff like this repeating itself again.
That's great. So, from what you've said about the partnership, primarily it is going to aid the business of culture.
Of course.
Interesting. Interesting. So, how exactly now this partnership is already in existence, but the question is, how can young people have access to it? How can they tap into it? It's one thing for something to be in existence, but it's another thing for people to know the right way for them to be a part of it.
So, first things first, the how. We had a training. So when we brought the Nigerian cluster coordinator down to Enugu to run this training, to expose these opportunities to young people who are in the creative and cultural sector, who are artists, who are content creators, who are designers, who do one form of art or the other. And that session happened, and we got the number of people that attended. Very few, but it could have been more. But again, the basic thing is that the calls will happen. So there'll be open calls. There are calls that may not be open. They are targeted because they've identified a group of people or organizations who are doing that particular thing they're interested in. But there'll be open calls. For instance, they have the artist exchange, where a couple of artists will be leaving by January, to different parts of Europe to have like a 3 months, 6 weeks immersion, and develop their capacity, come back, learn new forms and structures of doing these things, and then come back and have it done. And then those other ones will also come back in return to Nigeria and also see and learn as well, because it's learning. And I think that's one of the most important things for me. I think capacity development does a lot for you, and it opens you up to a new network of people who are likely going to, when they like your form and your art, they're likely going to continue to buy from you or link you up in places or people who would patronize your art. I have a friend I'm very proud of, Obuoja and Gerard Eze, and his Oja has taken him to different parts of the world. His Oja has taken him to kings and queens. His Oja, there's nobody he doesn't have access to. What does he do? Oja, right? So because they call it flute, I said Oja is not flute. Oja is different from flute, right? So you cannot call Oja a flute. So it's different, it's unique, and it's a storytelling instrument. And the Oja, they don't just blow it for the purpose of blowing. They say things just the same way your average musician, tell stories. The Oja. So you also have people who decode the Oja. So when Chimamanda came, he wrote a piece for Chimamanda with the Oja and printed it and gave it to Chimamanda. So what do you think Chimamanda will do to that work? She'll keep it because it's unique. It's different from any of the gifts she has ever collected in her life. So she will know that this piece was done for me with an Oja. And it has a unique way of being played. So it's powerful, and we need to understand that we have all of those things. We don't need to seek any other thing outside other than what we have.
Very true. Talking about art, tell me about MOA, Museum of African Art.
So Museum of West African Art is one institution I think will change the face of how we collect, we store, and we represent art. I was privileged to be part of their programs and then get to mentor students within one of their programs done in collaboration with the British Museum. And MOA is the future. MOA is the future. So back in time, we only have one place in Africa where we do carbon dating. So when you see a rare piece, you need to know what this piece is all about. You need to run the provenance. You need to know how long it has been in existence. And that place is in Senegal, but because of politics, that place is not functional. So you have to take it either to Oxford or any other place around Europe or America. And today, MOA has come to be, and it means that MOA will run all of the carbon dating that actually takes people from Africa or Igbo land or anywhere in Nigeria to the West. So we have them here in MOA, so which is a good thing for us. MOA has one of the best storage facilities, the same that you can get in any institution in the world, you can get it in MOA. The Center for Memories has a lot of artifacts, deposited in MOA as well. So, I mean, MOA is also painting a direction for all of us. This is the way to go. So if the center builds a permanent site, we're also going to take a leaf from MOA. And again, you look at the structure of MOA. MOA was built with the dust of Benin. Strong. If you know about the Benin moats, the Benin history is something that is, one of the most talked about, pieces of history across the world. I think I give kudos to a lot of Benin researchers and cultural custodians whose efforts has, made Benin history very appealing. And I think we should be able to do that for the Igbo history. What we are doing with Leja, for instance, Leja was the center of attraction in the Nigerian Pavilion during the London Design Biennale. And again, we've had Leja story shown on CNN, and we are doing a lot with Leja. We're in talks with the US mission. We need to do like a proper project in Leja. So our interest is to take one Igbo story one at a time, take one Igbo heritage one at a time, take one Igbo place one at a time, and ensure that it is same as any of similar stories that you can find, anywhere in the West. So we need to make our own, look what it is, be what it is, and tell the right stories. You can't imagine how many years China has taken on the toga of Iron Age technology until the carbon dating that shows that Leja has been smelting iron within 4000 BC. That's 2000 years before Christ. Right. So it shows you that we have a lot that we don't even know about, and it's only in talking about it or in promoting it or in researching about it that we get to find the nuggets or the gems in our heritage.
A lot of people that would watch this conversation may not really know what carbon dating is. Can you explain it?
So carbon dating is a scientific way of trying to know how long something has been in existence. So the terminology for it is carbon dated. So it's the process that it goes through to find out how long this thing has been in existence for. So that's the long and short of it.
I believe that's very clear now.
Yeah, very clear. Yeah.
It was a recent disruption of the MOA preview opening. What exactly happened?
I don't want to talk politics. I don't know. I don't want to talk politics. So it's all political. I don't want to say this because there's a presidential investigation and inquiry and committee set up. So I really wish we can avoid this. Maybe I can talk about it in private, but I won't talk about it. So I wrote an article on this, and then I've got a lot of reviews, people calling me and all of that, and said, "Oh, yeah." And it has traveled far to the point that we had a general conference of our International Council of Museums in Dubai, and it also was one of the things that was spoken about, and a lot of people had reached out, and and I keep saying the same thing. Let's wait until a verdict is reached. But the thing is, MOA was meant to secure not just Edo. So perhaps when they started, they had Edo Museum of West African Art, but in forming, they now found out that they may not need to limit their work to Edo. So it could be an African thing, and they became Museum of West African thing. And again, you look at the other part of it, a lot of the stolen artifacts that are repatriated are supposed to be returned to Benin people. So I think it was President Buhari that signed the consent from that. The returned works would be given to the Oba of Benin. And for a lot of the institutions who want to repatriate the works, they feel that the best place to return the works to at MOA, because they have the state-of-the-art facilities that is equivalent to the same facilities that they have back there, in the West. So, it's immersed in this conversation that we can't fully go into. Yeah.
Okay. I believe we'll still have the chance to still talk about it. Probably when the investigation is over, we can still have a more
definitely
understanding about the whole thing. We've spoken a lot about culture. Now, Talking about culture from the business point of view, what can we do in Nigeria for us to be taken more seriously as a global cultural hub? What can we do differently?
Let me paint a picture to you. So this is December. You know, everybody has been shouting Dirty December, but this is norm for average Igbo people. We call it homecoming every year. You know, annual mass return. People come back, and that's where we raise the highest form of money for the development of whether you are launching a new project within the village or within the church. You know, that's when they give what do you call it? Well, so they train a lot of people in schools and businesses. It's always happened within this period. There's a lot of money that, you know, money, economics, you know, that happen within, you know, this period for our people. But again, this is internal. Then look at external. Imagine a plane filled with Igbo origin Americans coming back to come to a place in Enugu to know about their culture and their history, how they came to be, right? So imagine that. Imagine the root stories that happen in Ghana and Barbados. Ghana is taking it like a lot of African Americans think that they actually have roots in Ghana. So you see this coming to motherland, they're going to Ghana. How do we attract them to come to the motherland? That is a question we've not been able to answer. So if you see the business part of it, for us at the center, we're taking it seriously. And by next year, we're going to have a grand exhibition that will bring people down, you know, to Enugu, where we're trying to work on, we've been trying to work on an exhibition for many years now on Mbido, the origin of Ndigbo. So an average Igbo person does not know the origin of Ndigbo. I think we want to deal with that, you know. And again, we realize that people come into the center and then they don't get anything, they don't buy anything, and we began to onboard artists into our artist space, residency artist spaces, and we have the Covey Wood now because the Oji, the Iroko, is a very spiritual tree for the Igbo people. And today you have the Covey Wood who are domiciled in the Center for Memories, making different furnitures, making different artworks with the Oji. We have the JK Mioli who uses coconut, to do plates, to do lamps, to do different kinds of things. And these are some of the things we want to showcase people about the culture, you know. So we have a lot of people who are working with one medium or the other that is tied to the culture. We want you to come in, see some of these things. And like those JK Mioli, their work have entered into different diplomatic missions house, and, you know, a lot of top influential people who have come down to the Center for Memories, and they've picked a lot of their works. And I think if we're able to do this with one of our partners is working on Ikenga. He has worked on Ikenga. It took him like 4 years to find an Ikenga. And a lot of Igbo men, in the past, Igbo men had Ikenga. Every Igbo man had an Ikenga. You know, so people are now grabbing the new Ikenga. You know, so you can imagine what if that becomes a thing, the economic, you know, gains it will yield, you know, for a people and for our skilled men, you know, who are working within the culture, creating products and all of that. You know, it's us that will consume it. You know, when we consume it today, like for instance, what happened with Isiago. So anybody that wants to show that they have an attachment to the Igbo culture, a red cap and Isiago. So we've not really done it very, very, very well. If we do it very, very well, that one would be a plus, and a lot of other things that the culture can borrow from and make sure that people find the need for all of those things. But we have to create an emotional appeal first. We create an emotional appeal, it will push every other thing and get us the money that we need.
We've spoken a lot. This is more like a cultural masterclass for somebody for somebody that really wants to understand the culture and wants to leverage culture to build wealth and to know it, not just about the monetary part, but to understand the Igbo culture. I believe the person must have gotten a lot from this conversation already. But finally, we live in the digital age. There is nothing we can do about it. I know there was a time you talked about the modernization so that young people do not abuse what they don't even understand. Now, what are the practical steps that young people need to follow for them to fully understand their culture and not abuse it? And also, how can they build wealth from it? Because at the end of the day, we want to understand it. Just like what Center for Memory is doing, they are preserving, documenting, and also monetizing, because that monetization is very important. So how can young people also tap into this ecosystem, this industry that is now booming?
I think a lot of young people who are Igbo, from Igbo origin in America, are doing a lot more. They're doing a lot more. They're invested in learning, and there are a lot of resources. They've generated a lot of resources. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them on different web-based websites, right? So So if you want to learn, there are places you can as well go to. There are books available online on Amazon, and yeah.
Can you give some examples?
So there's a book by Professor Anene Chukwume, The March to Igbo Civilization. So there are a lot of books. There's the one by Ugeze, The Python and the Rainmaker. So there are a lot of books that you can, and they're available online. There are a lot of books by Adiela Fibo, Elizabeth Isichei, a lot of books, there are a lot of works, available. So, but again, how can you take advantage, leverage? Igbo young people are digital natives. They have the camera, they have the mic, they have everything. So if you read a work, you can actually decide to come on TikTok and discuss it, or do a content around it. And if you have a product, you can still showcase it. I have Oma Beats and Blings who designed an Achalugo, a series, and it's sold out during the Things Fall Apart Festival, because everybody, like you mentioned, wants to be known as Achalugo. Yeah, so it's very simple. So find something. You have the Ubuntu apparatus who makes clothes, and then they can say this one is DK. And everybody who wants to be known and identified as DK would come straight for that. And it's business. So there's a lot for us to gain. There are people who teach Igbo classes, and then they teach to people who live in the US. They stay in Nigeria and they earn in dollars teaching Igbo language. So there's a lot that we can do to monetize. And I think for those who understand it, it's easy and they make quite a lot from it.
Okay, I hope that anybody that watches this would actually take your advice and find a way to connect what we are doing back to our roots, and not try to modernize it too much and not try to remove it. I don't think there's any benefit from doing that, actually. Any final words for our listeners?
So for me, I think it's our responsibility to tell our stories. Nobody can be youer than you. So it is in my best interest to talk about me. Start. I have Onyeka on IG. What does she do? Every day she has a reflection on Igbo proverb. She lives in the US. She was born in the US. I don't think she has been to Nigeria. She talks about Igbo proverb and how it relates to her. Something as basic as this. And I realized that she's actually been invited to events to come and make a presentation on Igbo proverbs with me and you. No, now we have tons of it. There's no way our parents talk to us without using a line or two for every sentence. So there is a lot that we can do in telling us. Find a story about your community, how you came to be, in your present location. Just storytelling is the new oil. Now, a lot of people are invested in telling stories of businesses, stories of people, but I think human angle stories would always get you interest, get you hooked and get you money. People, when you tell people something about themselves, you've got them. So invest in that and see yourself making tons of money from the culture.
Thank you so much, Mazi Iheanyi, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. I've learned a lot, and I believe that whoever listens to this conversation is also going to leave wanting for more. I'm probably going to come to your DM and ask you more, or come to Center for Memories for a proper education when it comes to culture.
We love that. So we love it when people come to the center, because most times one of the things I study, and I continue to do that, is when people come to the center, I look at their faces, and then we tell ourselves we need to convert these dispositions. And when they are leaving, most times you have to beg them to leave, because they come in and then they don't look like it's an exciting place. It doesn't look like it's something that they'll be interested in. But one of the things we do that differentiates us from a lot of museums and cultural institutions is that we base our work on storytelling. Storytelling is also very important. We don't fabricate stories. We weave stories around the work and make it more interesting for people, because you go to a lot of places, you see a lot of artifacts, and people don't get to understand what those artifacts are or what it stands for. They just take pictures with it and all of that. They lost the story. So for us, we don't want you to lose the story. We want you to understand the story. If you understand the story, if you see the artifact, then you can now understand the cares and whatever it is, why it was, produced in the first place. So, but thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and we hope to keep learning. We hope that this conversation will be worth it. We hope that when people watch it, they will leave good comments that this was very timely and very relevant. And to you, our amazing audience, if you're a young person watching this video, if you're an elderly person watching this video, I need you to understand that culture is not just people's way of life, but also a way of building wealth. Know your origin, go back to your roots, find out your purpose, find out your why, find out who you are, and find a way to monetize it, find a way to tap into the business of culture. And until next time, keep building.